It started as a normal morning in the quiet town of Krasnoufimsk, deep in Russia's frozen heartland. Smoke curled gently from the chimneys, and the streets were nearly empty, except for an old woman walking home with a loaf of bread. By noon, the town would be shaken, her door locked from the inside, her lifeless body found beside a broken teacup, her skull crushed. At first, the police thought it was a robbery gone wrong, but soon another woman died, then another, and another. Each victim was elderly, living alone, each killed in almost the same way. No one could have imagined that behind these brutal murders was not a man, not a gang, but a mother of two, smiling, polite, and wearing the uniform of a social worker. She called herself Irina. Others would later call her Satan in a skirt. If you think you can tell who's dangerous just by looking, stay until the end, because this story will prove how wrong we all can be. Russia, early 2000s.
In the industrial province of Sverdlovsk, where winters cut like knives and streets fall silent after dark, fear began to spread quietly from one wooden house to another. Old women started dying in their homes, beaten to death, their doors still locked from the inside. To the neighbors, it seemed impossible. Who would harm the elderly? And how could the killer vanish without leaving a trace? The first body was found in 2002. Within months, another. By the time police realized it was no coincidence, more than a dozen elderly women were dead. Each time a stranger had visited days before. A polite social worker, offering to help with pension forms or to check gas meters. She spoke softly, smiled warmly, and asked for tea. Within minutes of being let inside, she became something else entirely. Her name was Irina Gaidamachuk, a woman in her late 20s, a mother of two from a small town nearby. Outwardly, she lived an ordinary life, raising her children, caring for her husband, trying to make ends meet. But beneath that facade was a destructive addiction to vodka and a growing desperation for money. When her husband refused to give her cash, she found another way. For 8 long years, from 2002 to 2010, Irina roamed the region's towns. Krasnoufimsk, Druzhenino, Achit, searching for her next victim. Every door she knocked on could be her next payday. Every smile she gave could be someone's last. The police, baffled by the brutality of the killings, believed at first they were hunting a man. After all, who else could swing an axe with such force? But they were wrong, fatally wrong. The murderer they sought was not hiding in the shadows, but walking calmly in daylight, dressed as a helper of the weak and lonely. It began in the autumn of 2002, in a quiet neighborhood of Krasnoufimsk. The leaves had already turned yellow, and the air smelled faintly of smoke from nearby chimneys. Inside a small wooden house at the end of a narrow lane lived Lyudmila Pavlova, 78 years old, widowed, and known to everyone as Babushka Lyuda. She lived alone, surviving on her modest pension and the kindness of neighbors. That morning she heard a knock. A woman's voice called out, polite and soft. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm from the social services, just checking pension papers." Lyudmila, relieved to see someone friendly, opened the door. Standing there was a young woman with brown hair tucked neatly under a scarf, holding a clipboard. Her smile was kind, her eyes calm, almost gentle. Minutes later, That same house was silent again. When a neighbor came by in the evening, she smelled something metallic, saw the teapot overturned, and found Lyudmila lying beside the table, her skull shattered. Nothing seemed stolen, except for a small purse that once held a few rubles.
To the local police, it looked like a burglary gone wrong. They filed it, shook their heads, and moved on. No one knew it was only the first door Irina had knocked on. Over the next 3 years, the same scene repeated itself across the region. Small towns like Achet, Druzhenino, and Serov, each separated by frozen roads and forests, became silent witnesses to the same horror. Elderly women, living alone, found bludgeoned in their kitchens or bedrooms. Their doors were never forced open. The killer was always invited in. The police began to notice the pattern. Every victim lived within reach of Krasnoufimsk. Each home had traces of burning, stoves left open, curtains scorched. The blows to the head were precise, powerful, and always from behind. Rumors spread faster than official statements. People said it was a maniac, a thief, maybe a homeless veteran. Others whispered about an evil spirit, a woman in gray who vanished into thin air. But the real Irina walked among them in daylight, blending into the crowd, carrying groceries, greeting neighbors, pretending nothing was wrong. In her mind, the logic was simple. One visit, one bottle of vodka. The next day, guilt would fade into hangover. By 2007, panic had turned into public outrage. The authorities needed a suspect, and fast. Then came Marina Valayeva, a middle-aged woman with a criminal record for theft. She was seen near one of the murder sites, and the police dragged her in. Under pressure, terrified and confused, she confessed to one killing she hadn't committed. For a moment, the region breathed again. The murders would stop now, they thought. But within weeks, another old woman was found dead. Her body burned, her skull fractured. The supposed killer was still in custody. That's when a survivor emerged, a frail woman named Galina Sokolova, 82 years old. She was found barely alive after being struck in her own home. Through cracked lips, she whispered, "It was a woman. Brown hair." She smiled at me. The entire investigation turned upside down. For years, detectives had searched for a male killer. Now the image of the murderer shifted to something even harder to comprehend. A woman who killed grandmothers. In 2010, after nearly 8 years of unsolved murders, investigators in Sverdlovsk Oblast launched a desperate plan. They sent real social workers door to door, each followed secretly by plainclothes officers, hoping the killer would reveal herself. Then, on a cold June morning, fire broke out in a house in the village of Druzhenino. Inside was Alexandra Povoritsina, 81, dead from massive head trauma. Neighbors had seen a woman leaving moments before, carrying a handbag and moving quickly down the street. This time, the police arrived before the smoke cleared. In the ashes, they found a partial fingerprint on the doorframe, too clean to belong to the victim. When compared to local records, it matched one name, Irina Gaidamachuk, a resident of Krasnoufimsk with a minor record for petty theft. Officers tracked her down that same week. When they came to her small apartment, Irina was sitting on the sofa, her children nearby. She didn't resist. Her only words were, "Please, Don't scare the kids. At the station, she denied everything. But as evidence piled up, blood traces, stolen trinkets, the matching fingerprint, her story changed. Eventually, she confessed to 17 murders. When asked why, she said plainly, "I needed money. My husband wouldn't give me any. I wanted vodka." Even the most hardened detectives sat in silence. For 8 years, Russia had been haunted by a killer no one could imagine, a woman whose kindness was her deadliest weapon. When the arrest was made, the news spread through Sverdlovsk like wildfire. A serial killer, responsible for nearly 20 deaths, had finally been caught. But what stunned the public wasn't the number of victims. It was who the killer was. A woman. A mother. A neighbor. In the gray interrogation room, Irina Gaidamachuk sat quietly, hands folded in her lap. Detectives asked her name, her address, and whether she knew any of the victims. She answered each question calmly, like a woman explaining her shopping list. When they presented photographs of the murdered women, she didn't look away. She simply whispered, "Yes, I remember her." Her confession came in fragments, between sighs and cigarette smoke. She described how she would dress neatly, visit homes posing as a social worker, and strike when the victim turned her back. Sometimes she'd light a match, burn curtains or papers to cover her tracks. Then she would walk home, buy vodka, and drink until the faces disappeared. The officers who heard her said she showed no remorse, only irritation, because she'd been caught. At her apartment, investigators found an old axe hidden behind a wardrobe, its wooden handle dark with age. They also found small objects, cheap jewelry, pension envelopes, trinkets that once belonged to her victims. Each item was a silent witness to the 8 years of horror. When news reached the local villages, disbelief turned into outrage.
"How could no one notice?" one woman shouted at a police press conference. "She came to my door once. She smiled. For months, people in Sverdlovsk locked their doors before sunset. No one answered knocks from strangers anymore, not even real social workers." During trial preparations, psychologists examined Irina. Their reports described her as emotionally immature, alcoholic dependent, and incapable of moral empathy. They concluded she knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't insane. She was simply indifferent. In February 2012, the trial of Irina Gaidamachuk began in the city of Yekaterinburg. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, families of victims, curious onlookers. She entered wearing a plain brown dress, her hair neatly tied back. She avoided eye contact with everyone. The prosecutor read aloud the names of 17 women, each followed by the phrase, "killed by blunt force trauma." When asked for a statement, Irina said only, "I didn't want to kill anyone. I just needed money." Her lawyer argued for leniency, citing her difficult life and alcoholism. But the evidence was overwhelming. Fingerprints, confessions, witness testimony, and the recovered weapon. The verdict was inevitable. On June 12, 2012, the court found Irina Gaidamachuk guilty of 17 counts of murder and 1 of attempted murder. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison, the maximum sentence for a woman under Russian law at the time. As guards led her away, a journalist asked if she felt sorry for what she'd done. She turned slightly, smiled faintly, and said, "Regret doesn't change anything." Behind bars, Irina reportedly adapted easily to prison life. She cooked for inmates, read magazines, and rarely spoke of her crimes. Some guards described her as polite, even charming. It was the same charm she'd used to get close to her victims. Outside the prison walls, the wounds remained open.
Daughters and sons buried their mothers, wondering how anyone could carry out such cruelty for a few rubles and a bottle of vodka. The Russian media named her Satan in a skirt. The nickname stuck, not for its drama, but because it captured the nation's disbelief. Evil could wear lipstick, carry a purse, and ask for tea. The case changed how Russian authorities handled social welfare visits. IDs were checked more carefully, and elderly citizens were warned never to open their doors to strangers, no matter how kind their voice sounded. But for those who lived through those years, the fear never truly left. Each soft knock on the door carried an echo of Irina's voice. "Good morning, ma'am. Just checking pension papers." In the years after her conviction, the story of Irina Gaidamachuk became more than a criminal case. It became a cautionary tale whispered across Russia. People called her Satan in a skirt, a title that still drips with disbelief. How could a mother cradle her child at night and, by morning, bludgeon another woman's grandmother to death? Psychologists said her addiction had hollowed her out. Vodka had replaced empathy. Poverty had erased morality. But her crimes revealed something deeper, something darker. How evil can grow quietly inside ordinary people when desperation meets opportunity. Irina didn't kill for pleasure. She killed for convenience, for money to buy the next drink. Each visit was methodical, almost routine. A knock, a smile, a swing of an axe. She didn't see her victims as human, she saw them as currency. Her story forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. How well do we really know the people who enter our lives? The neighbor who smiles, the worker who offers help, the stranger at the door. How many dangers hide behind politeness, behind uniforms, behind soft voices? The tragedy of Krasnoufimsk wasn't just the lives lost. It was how easily trust became a weapon. Those women didn't die because they were careless. They died because they believed in kindness. Years later, the wooden houses of Sverdlovsk have grown quiet again. But the memory lingers like frost on a window, reminding everyone that monsters don't always hide in the dark. Sometimes they knock gently and wait to be invited in. So the next time someone comes to your door, wearing a smile and carrying a clipboard, remember this story. Evil doesn't always announce itself. It doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers. Thank you for listening to Crimes That Shocked the World. Where are you listening from tonight? Are you on your way home, sitting alone, or lying in bed with the lights off? Tell us in the comments. And if this story made you think twice before opening your door, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true cases from around the world. Every story we tell isn't just about crime. It's a warning. Because in real life, evil often looks exactly like someone you trust.